I got a request to do Lime Crime's Gargoyle semi-permanent hair dye. So I went onto the Lime Crime website, and for some reason at the time that I went on there, they only had a handful of hair dyes listed, and Gargoyle was not one of those colors. So then I went onto the Ulta website, and I noticed that they had these little packets that you could get to try out the hair dye, and so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna buy some of those. And in those they had all the colors, but I was afraid that because the Lime Crime website didn't have all the colors, that they were maybe discontinuing them or something. So I didn't end up buying Gargoyle because I didn't want to do it and then find out that it's discontinued and nobody can buy it anyways except for in the packets. I just had this whole scenario in my head. Now the packets come, and I decide to look back on the Lime Crime website, and of course all the colors are there again, but this time they were categorized between full coverage dyes, tints, and mixers. So all the colors that I had seen previously were full coverage dyes. They didn't have any of the now tint hair dyes or mixers. So with that being said, I ended up getting the charcoal hair dye. Hopefully the person who requested Gargoyle understands because they wanted a dye that was darker than the Ion Titanium, which is also like a silvery color. And the charcoal looks like it's darker as well. So I'm gonna do this today. It doesn't mean I can't do Gargoyle in the future. It's just kind of how things ended up working out, I guess. Now at the top of each strand, I'm going to take the dye directly from the package, put it on there. In the center of each strand, I'm going to dilute the dye, and on the ends, I'm going to dilute the dye even more. And I'll give you the measurements as I go, because depending on the dye, sometimes I'll switch it up. Also, they are numbered 1 through 9. That is just to keep track of the swatches throughout the video, because we will be doing close-ups. I just don't want you to get confused and think that it's supposed to be hair levels, because that's not what it is. So if you are wanting to make a request for a video for like a hair dye, color, or brand, I do have a link in the description of a Google spreadsheet that I made of my upcoming videos. It doesn't have every dye that has been requested to me yet, so feel free if you don't see it on there, don't worry. Basically how I'm going to do this is the more requests that a dye has, the more likely it will be to be filmed. So even if it's on my upcoming videos list, it could move up the priority more and get filmed faster if it's not already next. And then just so you know, this piece here is supposed to represent a toned version of the Platinum Blonde. For our first mixture, it's going to be a 1/4 of a teaspoon of the hair dye, and then a teaspoon of diluter. And then for the last one, we're going to do 1/4 of a teaspoon of the hair dye still, but now 1 tablespoon of diluter. I'm suspecting that I used too much diluter for the ends, and I'm thinking for the center I should have maybe done equal parts, so 1/4 of a teaspoon of dye and 1/4 of a teaspoon of diluter, but I guess we'll see once we wash these out. Also, once these are dried out, I will be comparing them to the Ion Titanium dye, so stay tuned for that. For now, we're gonna let these sit for an hour, and then I'll rinse them, wash them with shampoo, and then I'll meet you back here. I think my suspicion was right about having a smaller mixture for the first one. So keep in mind, if you do want to lighten this up any, you probably don't need a lot of diluter to do that. In my opinion, it doesn't really look like it starts to show up until number 6, which is pretty blonde. It's hard for me to tell on 4 and 5. It looks like maybe it toned the part like where it was directly put on, but it's so hard to tell. I don't know if it's just a shadow or if it is actually ashier. I want to say that with the Ion dye, it was a similar situation where it seems like the toned swatch took the dye the best out of all the blonde ones. This one is nice too, but I think this one looks just more evenly coated, whereas this one, there is a slight like blonde undertone in some of the pieces, and then these two are pretty patchy. I think they recommend for grays usually to be toned because it's hard for a gray to like take out the yellow tones in the hair unless you mix it with a purple. So I guess that does make sense. It's just if you want the true charcoal color, it will technically show up on your hair if it's around this light. It's just not going to be as much of an even consistency. So here are the comparisons with the Ion Titanium. All of the lower ones, 7, 8, 9, 10, those are Ion, and then the 6, 7, 8, 9 are Lime Crime's charcoal. So if you want a darker, more rich gray, the Lime Crime charcoal would definitely be a better option. The titanium is clearly a lot lighter, and even more so than Lime Crime, I would recommend having very toned hair before using it, because like even on the platinum blonde one, it just kind of looks more ashy than it does silver. And the only one that really does look like true silver to me is the toned one for the Ion, whereas you can really see the grayness for Lime Crime on all 4 swatches. On all 4 swatches. Right, I think it's time we get into the close-ups. was Lime Crime's charcoal semi-permanent hair dye. I was listening back to my description of the Google spreadsheet that I have linked below, and I'm very bad at explaining things sometimes, so basically I just want to reiterate that you can totally request a dye, whether that be a color or a brand or both, but you can also check out my Google spreadsheets to see if it is already a video that's coming up. But either way, the more requests that a dye has, the more likely it is for me to film that dye. So again, feel free to make a request. Only stipulation is that I want it to be cruelty-free. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this helped, and maybe I'll see you in my next video.